Hello, everyone. My name is Zunera Ahmed. As mentioned, I work for Congressman Max Rose, who represents Staten Island and Southern Brooklyn. I'm also a part of my local community board. I'm a member of County Committee for Brooklyn. I also am a part of a political club called Southern Brooklyn Democrats. That's a long list of titles, but I got my start here. I got my start at Ignite. This is where I switched my major, became politically active. This is where I realized that politics is so relevant in all of our communities. So I have to thank Ignite for really, really getting me started in politics and kind of directing me in that way. And I hope you guys kind of take the lessons that you learn here to kind of make your own path and see what kind of political leader you want to be. Because the fact that you're here today, the fact that you showed up, means there's something in you that's interested in developing being a leader, being a political leader, being an elected official, being the next president of the United States, whatever it may be. This is your support system. This is the people that are gonna knock doors for you, that are gonna vote for you, that are gonna donate to you. So this is kind of a sisterhood that you can't really find anywhere else in politics because it's still an old boys club. So I'm really happy to kind of moderate this panel. We have amazing candidates and elected officials that are gonna talk through their process, and I'll introduce them now. Can we please have Amanda Septimo? Hello. Amanda is born and raised in South Bronx. She has a long, rich history of service to the community that began with community activism in her teens. Over the years, Amanda has worked with local community organizations to advance an agenda of inclusive, sustainable, and responsible growth in the Bronx. Today, she is a candidate for the New York State Assembly in the Bronx 84th District. And the core message of her campaign is built on the idea that everyone deserves access to opportunity and that we must support policies that work to uplift the entire community. In the past, she's worked for the Council of School Supervisors and Administrators to ensure that school leaders and students have the resources they need to transform every school into a thriving learning environment. Before that, she spent 4 years working for Congressman Serrano in the Bronx. In 2014, Amanda became one of the youngest serving senior advisors in Congress when she was promoted to district director for the 15th district in the Bronx. In her time as district director, Amanda significantly expanded the pool of federal resources in the district and amplified the array of services available to constituents. Today, Amanda works with the New York State Nurses Association to ensure that our most vulnerable communities have access to high-quality health care they deserve. Give it up for Amanda. Next, I would like to invite Tricia Shimamura. Tricia is a progressive activist, trained social worker, and proud resident of the Upper East Side. She serves as second vice chair of Manhattan's Community Board 8 and is also the chair of the Diversity and Outreach Committee of the Four Freedoms Democratic Club. Previously Deputy Chief of Staff to Congresswoman Maloney, Tricia also volunteered on several New York campaigns, including Christine Quinn, Rebecca Seawright, Carolyn Maloney, and Hillary Clinton. Tricia is a new mom to Teddy and a candidate for New York City Council's 5th District, which includes the Upper East Side and Roosevelt Island. Together with other like-minded women, Tricia founded and chairs She Will Rise, which seeks to combat gender inequality through building a pipeline of female leadership and inspiring young women to engage with local communities, super relevant. She Will Rise prepares women to rise up and become the next generation of leaders in government and across professional sectors through offering a wide array of leadership training and programming, including government 101 classes, financial literacy trainings, and professional development seminars. Give it up for Tricia. Next, we have Jessica Weaver. Jessica was just elected last month to the Board of Education in her hometown of Newington, Connecticut, at the age of 21. She's a recent graduate of the University of Connecticut, where she earned her BA in political science. During her undergrad career, she entered for Congressman Larson, the Connecticut Office of the Treasurer, and the Commission of Women, Children, and Seniors. Currently, Jessica is finishing her master's in public policy at UConn and serving as a graduate fellow at the YWCA Hartford region in their advocacy department. She's an active member of community serving as the CT Civic Ambassador and the Obama Foundation Community Leadership Corps member. Jessica also recently started at the Office of Early Childhood, working at the state of Connecticut's 2-Gen intergenerational anti-poverty program. She's also grateful for all the help and support Ignite has given her. Welcome, Jessica. Next, I'd like to welcome Samantha Perlman. Samantha Perlman recently made history as the youngest woman ever elected to Marlborough City Council at the age of 24, and the first-time candidate to top the ticket in a council race. A proud graduate of Emory University, Sam currently works at a nonprofit dedicated to evidence-based policy and is a chair of her city's cultural council. Her background is in state and federal legislative policy work, community organizing, and youth civic engagement, where she's helped secure passage of the 2018 Massachusetts Civic Education Law. Sam is also a graduate of Emerge, Massachusetts, and is passionate about empowering young leaders to pursue paths in government and public service. Give it up for the 4 amazing ladies. So we're gonna start the discussion about what it means to be running for office. All of your names have been on the ballot, or they're either going to be on the ballot. Can you describe a little of why did you decide to run, and what was that process like for you? If you want to start, Amanda, that'd be great.
Sure. So I actually, as Zunera mentioned, I started kind of doing political work when I was 15. I was interning at the congressman's office that I went on to work for, which is my home district. It's where I've lived my whole life. And, you know, I think right now we're having like a moment where a lot of women are stepping up to answer the call and lead in their communities through running for elected office. And you hear people have these really incredible stories of like, I saw my representative do this thing, or they voted this way and that really inspired me. But the reality is that that's not my story. I live in the South Bronx, where for many, many years we've been plagued with issues around housing, education, health. And it's really just been a slow drip of watching our community not have the representation that it deserves, where there was a few times kind of working in government and working with nonprofits where I'd have the thought that it's like, well, you know, I wish somebody spoke up more about that issue, or I wish somebody would do a little more on this. I would have said this differently, or I would advocate more for this. And you hope and you hope and you hope that other people will do it. And then finally you just decide to stand up and do it yourself. And that's really, once I got to that moment, that I realized I didn't have to wait for everyone else to do it. I didn't always have to hope that I could convince someone else that the issues in our community were important, that I could bring that voice and bring that fight myself. It really changed my life and my perspective, and I made the decision to run because of it.
That's amazing. And can you elaborate on how you chose what seat to run, and how, you know, a lot of what you've seen in your community was influencing that decision?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that the truth is, and I was having this conversation earlier, I think that every level of government matters. And it's really, when we hear about Congress, it's exciting, right? Anytime you're in DC, I think it's impossible to go to DC and not leave feeling inspired. But the reality is everything from school board to city council to state assembly to Congress, every single level of government matters, because ultimately you can have the best federal representation in the country. And if you have state and local officials who are not showing up, who are not making sure that resources get where they're supposed to go, then your community is not going to feel that change. And so I think I think any office that you feel called to is something that you should explore, but really understand that there is value in every level of office, and starting anywhere is valuable because we need voices everywhere.
Yeah, awesome. Great. Jessica, can you tell us how it felt when you were elected last month?
Pretty freaking awesome. No, yeah, it's kind of like a surreal feeling to know that you're an elected official, because it was kind of a weird night. I had this feeling going in that my party wouldn't win, but I would win. And it's one of those feelings where I was so excited all day to just kind of talk to people. So on election day, you're usually polling. And you have to stand next to everyone, and it's really funny because you're standing next to someone you're running against, and you're like, hey, how's it going? And I tend to be someone who just kind of talks forever, so I was talking to all of them, and I think they got so annoyed with me. I started singing. I was like, thank you for voting. And I just was being really silly because really it's hours on hours on hours of work. I was there from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. And we got to the election night results, and you go and you check out the results, and I mean, they were in really fast. By 8:30, they were already in. And it was one of those things where I kept checking the numbers, and I was like, oh my God, yeah, I'm on.
Nice.
Yeah. And then I noticed, hey, I beat like all my friends that I ran with. Oh, hey, wait, I'm like the top vote getter for the Democrats here. Like, hey, I didn't just get in, I won.
Okay.
And I think it's one of those feelings where you kind of don't know what to do. You're like, I'm happy, but also sad that everyone else lost. But also kind of a very large sense of panic, because you're like, okay, now I have to do this. What's next? What's my next step? And I think for a lot of us who are elected, we're going into this, we're running, but there is always that sense of imposter syndrome that still comes up. So I'm like, can I do this? Wait, you're running, you can do this, yeah. So yeah, it was a really surreal night.
Nice. Tricia, you'll be running for city council in 21. Yes. Why that seat? Why that year?
Hi everybody. Thank you so much for being here. I love Ignite, and I've been a part of Ignite since they started coming to New York in 2016. Oh, yeah. So I am running for city council on the Upper East Side. My community has never elected a person of color on the city, state, or federal level ever. I am the only person of color running in this race. I'm also the only mom running in this race. Running in this seat has meant more to me than just one seat, one campaign. This is my home, this is my community, this is where my baby, who you'll see screaming in a little bit because he missed his nap, this is where he's growing up, and so my interest and investment in this community is more than my life. It's my family's life and my neighbors and the families that I've met along the way. I wanted to run for the city council because even though my background, like Amanda, is in Congress, I know that our city issues, the local issues, our parks, our transportation, our education system, these somewhat smaller in comparison in scale issues really have a huge impact on our day-to-day lives. Whether or not you have pre-K seats in your district, whether or not you have safe streets to walk down, whether or not there's garbage pickup, and there's clean, open park space for you and your families to enjoy. Those are the real issues that affect everybody's day to day, and that's why I came into this race. I always introduce myself saying that I'm mom first, wife second, candidate somewhere down the line. And really everything in my campaign has focused on trying to integrate all of those things and run an authentic campaign that puts my family and the families that are supporting me first.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. So Samantha, as the youngest woman ever elected, also, how did that feel? How was that decision making to be on the ballot, to be a candidate, and why that seat as well?
Well, again, thank you all so much for the opportunity to be here. At one point, I was an Ignite person sitting in the audience, so it's really great to see what happens when you have the confidence to get out there and run. Election day was really a blur. I think I had, so I don't drink coffee, and on election day I had 2 coffees within like 1 hour. And someone got me a bar of chocolate, so I was like very energized, and I also had to be with the opponents as well. So in my district, I ran for one of the at-large seats, which represents the entire city. It's about 40,000 people where I live, and I was running against 4 incumbents and 2 other challengers for one of the 4 seats. And I had done, government work growing up. I always thought I wanted to be a federal judge, so I was like, I can't get involved in politics. I'll never get to be a judge if I get involved in this. And then I kept seeing things happening and really wanted to be involved in my community and run in my hometown. And I didn't see people that looked like me on the body, right? It was 11 counselors. There was one woman. Everyone was in their 60s. And I didn't feel represented. I would go to meetings and I could count the number of women on one hand. I was the only person under the age of 50 in the room. And people would kind of be like, did you get lost? Like, they gave me a look, right, when I was sitting in the council meetings in the back, even before I started running. But it's really when I started getting locally involved and I joined one of the local boards and got appointed and then really saw that gap, not just on the council, but really throughout local government, and was like, you know what, if I want to see young women in office, and I got to do it as well, right? I got to put myself out there. And, running in your hometown is kind of awkward, right? You run into people like all the time, and they're kind of went to high school with them, but it's an interesting scenario. But election day itself was really a blur, and the moment I found out was kind of exciting as well. So as was mentioned, it's sort of like all day, I was at the polls a little bit, but I spent a lot of time on the phone calling everyone who had been identified as a supporter, being like, did you go vote today? Did you go vote today? Giving people rides to the polls, right? Recovering from all that coffee, right? There was a lot going on. But then when we finally got the numbers, I was told, 8 p.m. the polls close. At that point, you really can't do anything, right? You're just waiting. And I remember feeling so nauseous and just so nervous because I couldn't do anything to find out the result. And I had a bunch of volunteers with me at my house who were also making calls, and I was told to go in my room, and because my house was headquarters, and we were able to have people pulling the polling numbers from each of the locations, and I would wait up there, and they would tell me the results, and my boyfriend was going to tell me. So I'm up there, and I'm like, it's 8:30, it's 8:45, it's like close to 9 o'clock, and no one's come up. I'm like, oh my gosh, it must be so close. We must have lost. Like, this is horrible. So I'm like dancing. I think I'm playing every badass women music ever to empower myself. I'm like, there was a lot of Beyonce came on. I was just dancing in my room, blasting it, and then we got a knock on the door, and my boyfriend went out to find out the results. And when he left, I was like, all right, it's all or nothing. I dedicated 8 months of my life to this. What happens? And he came back in. He had a little bit of a smirk on his face. I'm like, okay, we might have made it. And he goes, you topped the ticket. And I just started crying. I was like, you're lying to me. He's like, no, you really did it. And I just ran downstairs to everybody, and bringing me back right now. But it was just really incredible because you spend so many months canvassing and talking to folks, and you really don't know what's going to happen. You do all this data, but to actually know the result, and it really wasn't my win. It was the community's win because we'd worked so hard together, and that's what made it so special. And it's a moment I'll never forget.
Wow, that's amazing. You should all run for office and have that moment. This is a specific question for Amanda and Tricia. Since you guys are kind of in that campaign mode, I'm a candidate, we would love to hear more about how did you decide to organize your campaign? Who did you pick to be your campaign manager, your finance director? How was those decisions made? And we often hear the term kitchen cabinet. If you could kind of go into that process.
Yeah, I love my kitchen cabinet. So for anyone out there who's considering running, get your kitchen cabinet order. You can do that now without even declaring a seat or without even taking those real official first steps. Your kitchen cabinet are the people who love and support you, who are going to be there to give you advice. They will be maybe not the people you think. My mother is not on my kitchen cabinet. I love her to pieces, but she's not going to make my strategic decisions and help me make some strategic decisions. She also lives way out of state. But I do have one of my friends who serves with me on my community board on my kitchen cabinet, and I have some of my best friend from college who I moved to New York with, who he's on my kitchen cabinet because he knows how I deal with stress, and he knows the type of people I trust and put on my team. I do want to give one shout out to the first kind of official person I have on my campaign, which is the young student who's taking pictures of me in the front row. Something that I was really excited about, Rafi Jacobson and I met at an event not in my district, kind of randomly out in the Bronx, and he was young, 16 years old, but had so much to offer, and this is where I truly believe in the power of students and the power of young people. Rafi, in my mind, is the perfect example of someone who's smart and talented and has a voice and a perspective and is value added to any campaign. I'm just lucky to have him. So he's running my youth advisory board. So I have a group of young people who I meet with every month to talk about issues that are important to our students in the district, to talk about climate change, standardized testing, specialized high schools, mental health in schools, across the board, just other issues that come up. So I do have my outreach coordinator in Rafi. I also have my treasurer is my husband, who's also my babysitter at the moment, probably somewhere around the corner. But he's my treasurer, so he helps me do my campaign finance stuff. And we're still looking for a campaign manager. It's still early on, to be honest with you, in the campaign. We're trying to be decisive. I will say that we're going to be sticking around after this because we are creating a fairly robust internship program this summer. So if you're interested in working for a person of color running for the Upper East Side, I'm singing now just like you are, come talk to us afterwards. We'd love to get you on board and really trying to just build this locally from the ground up.
Nice.
So I actually ran for the state assembly in 2018 for the same seat. I'm running against someone who, I'm 29, she's been in office for 27 years, so almost my entire life. And we got just under 40%, which was exciting. Wasn't enough to get us all the way there, but excited to close the gap this time. So now that we're doing this again and working hard to get it right, I've been really deliberate about decisions around staff. The kitchen cabinet is super important, just people that you trust, and they don't always have to be people who are political and who kind of know what they're doing. It's really people who know you and want what's best for you and know that you're in this for the right reasons, because there will be plenty opportunities where people really question why you're doing this stuff. But I'm actually I was thinking about it just now, my entire team is made up of women. And that is super important to me, and it's something that I think shows itself in how we do work. I have my campaign manager here, my volunteer coordinator's here, my mom is also here. My mom dabbles in and out of the kitchen cabinet, right? We'll give her that. But I think that there is absolutely something inherently different about doing politics when you are a woman. And when you are trying to run for office, when you're trying to raise money, when you're trying to garner support, anybody who's been even sort of close to it will tell you that it is a different beast. And I think it's really important to have not only people who support you and care about you, but who can sort of understand what it's like. Because even if you've never worked in politics before, I bet everyone here has some story of a time where they felt counted out because they were young, or because they were a woman, or because they were of color, or the combination of the three. And I'm really grateful to have a team of people who understand that perspective and understand the really unique voice that comes with being a young woman, and how we live in a world where politics doesn't necessarily always feel like it welcomes that voice and creates space for that voice. But I've been really deliberate about choosing a team that understands that and works to bring that to the forefront. And then the last thing I'll add is that I think an unspoken part of this game is other women who are running, other candidates. There's like a club of support that you find, because it's such a specific process that you want to just call someone and say, hey, I just spent 10 hours smiling, but I want to cry because someone mean tweeted me, right? And like, there's only a few people who can really understand that. And I found it really powerful to be able to do that. And so like I have a friend, Lindsay Boylan, who's running for Congress. We are always kind of commiserating. I have a friend, Althea, who's running for council in the Bronx. We're always kind of sharing these experiences. And there really is a sense of empowerment to know that you're not in this alone, and there's other people who care about this work and who are willing to support you in the moments that it's scary.
Can't emphasize that enough. Samantha and Jessica, you guys were groundbreaking at getting elected at the ages of 21 and 24. What was it like to be a candidate, and how'd you balance that new life? Either of you can start.
Yeah, balance. Good question. So it's definitely challenging. I was working a full-time job and actually started a new job while I was campaigning that was a commute from where I live. So that was something that definitely added an additional barrier for me to balance. Also, right, none of your friends are running for office too, so it's sort of like a really weird situation where you're trying to do something and it's more than yourself, but some people might not always understand why you're doing it, and that's something that people kind of come along the way with you. And I think it's really the mentorship that was described, the other women that I was able to meet through Merge and even through the Ignite network that we're running was really helpful for me. A lot of them were older than me and willing to sit down and grab coffee or just be like a text away if I had a question. But it's really, I think the biggest thing that made it possible was really like time management and balancing, and my new job was really supportive. Like, they all came in Canvas for one day. They all took the day off to come to the inauguration, and I work in the nonprofit sector, so I know that they're saying, I was like, hey, like, I know it's kind of like I'm taking some time off to do all these things, and they're like, I don't see it as separate from your nonprofit work, right? You're living out your values, and that's what's so important is, like, a lot of times balancing things, right? Running for office is like you're giving your full self to do something that's larger than just you, and you're trying to change a community. You're trying to motivate people, inspire them, and everyone should get on board with that, regardless of the candidate, right? If people are really doing it well. And so I think a lot of the ways that I was able to stay grounded too, I had a kitchen cabinet that was really effective, and some high school students as well who were really helpful, and it really does take a village to run for office. So if any of you know someone who's running or you want to get involved, people are always eager to have more help and support. And I think just one of the biggest things that also came up when running is a lot of people would see me and not think I was a candidate. Wow. All the time, right? So, I think I started to dress kind of like business casual when I would be canvassing, and then people were kind of like, oh, I don't want any, I'm not buying anything. And you're like, I'm not selling anything, right? Like, I'm not here to like solicit at your door, and a lot of people slam the door in your face. And I think becoming comfortable with who you are and knowing that when you are canvassing, campaigning, and those interactions happen, it isn't personal, right? You didn't have an opportunity to really share who you are, so that person, right, is making just a judgment because we don't see candidates, asking people for their vote enough and actually getting out there and meeting people at their doors. And so the way that I was really able to deal with that is know that it's not me, right? It's more of a societal thing that we need to get over. And then as well, just kind of saying, no, I am the candidate, right, repeatedly. And one story I will share that I think is powerful for the young women in the room who should and will run. Early on when I was campaigning, I was going door to door, and this older couple came down, and I talked to everyone when they were on the street to introduce myself. And I remember definitely saying my name and that I was running for city council, right? Those like definitely came out of my mouth. And this man looks at me and he goes, oh, are you the candidate's wife? Yeah. And I was like I remember so many thoughts came in my mind in that one moment. And I said, no, I am the candidate. And he goes, oh, you don't see you just see so many men running. I said, I know, sir, and that's why we need more women running. And, I grew up in this community my whole life and, talked about the issues that I cared about. And then he's like, wow, good for you. He's like, I'm going to vote for you. And in that moment, I was really angry at first when he said it. And I realized that it wasn't like he was just, being rude. He literally had not seen a young woman running for office. And imagine if he saw every single one of you in the room running, right? How would that change people's narrative of who can run and who should be in office? Right. And so I always carry that story with me to be like, that's why I'm running, because I'm just changing what a leader looks like in our community. Yeah. And that is something that, regardless of the outcome of the election, was worth running in the first place.
Nice.
Yeah, I relate to this so much. So for me, I ran at 21. I'm just turned 22 in December. So it's difficult to run when you are only 5 years out of high school and you're saying, I want to run the school system. But it's also a really good way to show that you're connected to the school system. So I really just said, okay, if anything is perceived as a weakness, I'm going to change it into a strength. So for me, it was really about showing that I was part of the community. And I think a lot of times when you're in like the suburbs or you're in your community, just talking about things in your community is a way to get into the door. So for me, I was like, oh yeah, I grew up here. I've lived my whole life here. And they're like, oh really? Yeah. And I was like, oh yeah, I actually live in the former mayor's house. That was lucky, I guess. But they're like, oh yeah. And it's kind of one of those towns where everybody knows everybody. So you're like, oh yeah, I did this. Oh, my sister's on the swim team. I'm usually doing these swim meets. So for me, it was really just about making those connections and saying, oh, well, yeah, I'm young, but this is what I do. And I think it was one of those struggles where I tried to justify what I've done in my life already to show you that I'm qualified. I was like, yeah, I worked for Congressman Larson. I did this. I worked in the Treasury. I've also worked in the Commission on Women, Children, and Seniors. And everyone's like, whoa, slow down. What? And I was like, yeah, I've done all of these things. And I'm also getting my master's in public policy. It's on, my specialization is in K through 12 education spending. And they're like, whoa. And I just tried to get that out as fast as I can, but it was one of those things where I had to realize, like, you can slow down. You can tell them that. But I did feel that need to try and justify it. Because one time someone thought I was selling solar panels, and they were like, ugh, I don't want to buy solar panels. I was like, I'm not selling solar panels. I actually don't want any of your money. I just want your vote. He was like, oh, cool. All right, nice. And another time, someone thought I was from the high school selling soccer fundraisers. And I was like, no, but I did play travel soccer in middle school. So, that's a connection we have. But I think one of the worst times was when I went out and I was campaigning and I brought my sister along. And my sister's 17. She looks 15. I look 16. So we're already struggling there. And they asked which one of us was running. And I was like, oh my God, no. They're gonna know. Like, I'm so young. And we left the house and he said, oh, thanks, Lindsay, so much. I'll vote for you. And I was like, my name's Jessica. My sister's name is Lindsay. Oh my God, he thinks she's running. But it's just one of those things that I think you have to get over. And like you said, it's practice. Every door is a new opportunity for you to get better at it and be able to make an impression. And I think for me, like I said, I just used a lot of the things that being young is actually an advantage for me. I know the school system well. I know all the teachers. I'm able to talk to them about the issues that are going on. All the students feel comfortable coming up to me because I literally see them in the hallways when I'm at a swim meet or a tennis meet for my sister. They all know me because I was like a nerd in high school. And they're like, oh yeah, your sister was like that nerd on student council. And I'm like, yeah, that's me. And I think for me, that was really actually an advantage because the students feel comfortable. And in the end, I'm on a school board, and that's who we're benefiting. And we also have 2 student representatives on there. So I was like, hey guys, I'm running. I went to school with your sister, remember? And she's like, oh yeah, oh my God. I was like, you're doing the play right now. I was in the play when we were in high school. Remember how Mr. Connolly was like talking about all this stuff and he was a really harsh director? And she's like, oh my God, yeah. I was like, cool. Okay, can you get all your friends to register to vote? Because I know you're turning 18 before November. So it's one of those things where I think, it depends on the seat that you're running for, but actually, like you said, young people are really helpful, and you being young is actually a huge advantage because you're able to say, oh, well, I'm representing students that are just 5 years younger than me. I've been in that exact spot. I know what the school system has done for me, and this is how I want to better it so that I can continue to have it. And I kind of added on the end, my sister's still in the school system, but I have 2 baby cousins that moved to town. And they're going to be coming up in the school system. And I want to make sure that continues for them, that they get a great education coming forward. And they're like, wow, you really do care about the future of our community. I was like, yeah, that's kind of the point. So for me, that was really important to tie it in of that I'm young, and that's why I'm running.
Awesome. Yeah.
I just wanted to pipe in with one comment. I think it's really tempting, and it happened to me a lot, where you feel like you have to justify on doors. Like when you look young, when you feel like maybe I shouldn't be doing this, that little bit of doubt that kind of lives with you sometimes. I would find myself mentioning my work in Congress and so that I could validate why I was standing there. But ultimately I realized that I'm validated just because of who I am. And that's something that I hope that everyone in this room, as you think about running, you are an expert in your community just by virtue of living there. Just because every day you wake up and you see the issues and you live them every day, you are an expert. And so every time you have that doubt, confront it. And then every time you experience that doubt from someone else, understand that that's their limitation, not your own. Because it is really tempting to fall into that trap and think like, well, am I supposed to be doing this? Maybe I am too young. Maybe I haven't worked long enough. But the reality is that if you feel the call and you have ideas and you have answers, then it's certainly never too early. And everyone's gonna benefit from you stepping up and being brave because we don't have enough of that.
Yeah, nice. So as we wrap up the panel, Ignite does recognize that 2020 is a huge year and amazing opportunities will open up for young women. So if each of you can kind of give one advice, one thing that young women can do to make an impact this year, what will it be?
For me, I think one of the things is one, register to vote, obviously. So I'm going to get multiple, sorry.
Okay.
But really quick, one, register to vote, obviously. Get to know who your elected official is. Get to know what the civic process is in your town. It's very easy. Just look online. Everyone's phone number and email are posted on there for all your elected officials. And I think one of the last things is the one thing that really got me into where I am at was I got recognized because I was testifying in the legislature. And it was simple as submitting testimony. You can submit it online, but just start getting your name and attach it to some testimony, because that shows you that not only are you willing to put your views out there, but you're also willing to take the time to care about an issue. You don't have there's no age limit. There's no age requirement. You can simply just email it. So get to know the process of your legislative body, because it is not always easy, but it's something that you can just simply look up, and not many people take the time to do it.
I'm going to echo register to vote, please. Also take the census, just please. Take the census this year. Tell everybody to take the census. My official, I guess, a piece of advice would be to go to a community meeting. If you live in New York, you belong to a community board meeting, which it happens. So once a month, your neighbors get together and talk about the issues that affect your community. Go to that. If you live outside of New York, go to a tenants association meeting, go to a school education council meeting, go to a community meeting. This is a really great way to just better understand what your neighbors are talking about, what's the big issues that are facing your community. And as Amanda said, I mean, you are a valid candidate just by virtue of living in that neighborhood. So your voice matters, make it matter, go to a meeting and see where you can contribute.
Echoing the census and echoing register to vote. So I will add on to that, but please, yeah. I would say, in addition, really starting where you are. I think we're often thinking, obviously 2020 is a presidential year, like absolutely we all need to be engaged in that. But there's so much happening too at the local and state level, and that's really where the volunteers are needed the most, the contributions, the support, the even just like understanding a lot of the issues. People don't really know how a candidate actually is on a particular topic. So I would encourage people to research who's running for office in their own community, but also to really be empowered to push them. And so if there's an opportunity to maybe have a forum where that person is speaking, to actually ask questions that you would want of your elected official, because sometimes they will deflect them, and you'll really see how people are about certain issues. And the only other thing that I would add is if you are able to, I would join an appointed or local board as a member and see what the process is like in your own community, because that's a really great way to get a first-hand look at government, and it's a good gateway to wanting to run in the future.
I think that my best piece of sage advice for 2020, I think for all years, is to ask for opportunities that you want. I think we live in a crazy world and we see a lot of bad people in government lately. But I think most people who are working in government and in nonprofits and running campaigns are doing it because they want to see positive change in their community. So they're by and large good people, hopefully. And they want to be helpful. And everyone got their start somewhere, and I think everyone who's on a campaign really knows that and wants to be helpful and is always eager for more support and more help. And I think something about the world sort of shifts us as women to not always ask, but we shouldn't be shy about asking for opportunities. It's exactly how I landed the internship at the congressman's office at 15. They hadn't even had a high schooler in the office before that. And I just said, hey, I want to help, and can you find space for me? And that really changed my life. And I think that asking is important, but then beyond that, I think as women, young women especially, sometimes we fall into the trap where we feel lucky to be somewhere. And so we kind of deal with things that maybe we shouldn't. And ultimately, I think realizing that you bring value to every organization that you're part of. You bring value to every room where you share your voice, your experience, your expertise. So if something is not serving you, you're not being treated well, you're not being given responsibilities that you like, or your experience is just not what you want, it's okay to leave and find a different experience that serves you and that gives you what you're looking for, because there's so many opportunities to get involved. You don't have to be unhappy. You don't have to feel like this is your only shot, like you're never gonna get picked up somewhere else, because it's just not true. because there is value in your experience and your perspective, and people everywhere will see that. You just have to be brave about asking for those opportunities, and I promise that you'll get them. There's an opportunity fair happening here right after this. We'll be tabling, but Tricia had mentioned she'll be around, right? There's always opportunities everywhere to get involved, and I mentioned to there's a young girl here who's 12 who's looking to get involved, and was saying how age had been a barrier for her. But there's always people out there who are willing to help, and I told her we'll find her a job to do on the campaign. And if not, people know people, and they'll always be willing to connect you. But ask and walk away from situations that don't serve you.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo that and say the things that half the battle is showing up. It's really hard to just go to a community board and you're like, oh my God, do I say anything? I don't want to say anything. I don't want to do this. And that's for all the introverts out there and extroverts even. When you're in a room of 60-plus-year-olds and you don't know what to say or what you have to contribute, just show up. Because a lot of times they'll come up to you, they'll ask you what you're doing, that'll spark a conversation, and that's what it is. Really, it's just showing up. That's half the battle, and that's half the battle before you even run. And then you run and you win.
Yeah, nice. I do want to say at Ignite's conference back in 2017 when I was in the college council, Tricia was there on a panel that I moderated then. Yeah. And the advice was to show up. Show up at campaigns, show up at political clubs, show up at clubs on campus, run for student government, own your political power because you have a reason to be there and you have ideas to implement, so you can't not show up. So what I will say is if you are on a college campus, start an Ignite chapter, find young women like you that are interested in politics that just don't know what to do with that interest, and own your political leadership. Run for office, whether that's local or not. We want to see you in government. We want to see you in these leadership positions, and you have a family here at Ignite. So thank you for being here. Give it up for our amazing panel. Thanks all.